Hey, it's Ross from rosslukeman.com. Today I want to talk to you about the Mopeka ProCheck tank sensors. These are going to wirelessly take the levels of your propane or water tanks in your van or RV, and they're going to report that data back to the Mopeka Tank Check app on your smartphone, or with the recent firmware update, the Cerbo GX from Victron Energy will actually pick up their Bluetooth signal, and we're going to be able to see those tanks on our tanks overview screen there on the Cerbo GX. So very versatile sensors here. We can do vertical or horizontal propane tanks. And for the propane, they have the permanent magnets on the back. These are the neodymium high strength magnets. And we're going to add a little dielectric grease, and it's just going to hop right onto the tank just like that. I'll show you how to set that up and calibrate it in just a second. Now for the water tank sensor, it's really the same exact sensor. It's just got a water droplet on the front instead of a picture of a propane tank. But it's got those magnets in there. But with our plastic water tanks, the magnets are kind of useless. However, they're going to send us this little cage that goes on the bottom of the tank. They're going to give you instructions for how to clean the tank, prime it, and make sure that the adhesive permanently bonds on there. This is actually a two-piece little cage where the lid snaps on, and it's going to press the sensor up against the tank. We're going to add our dielectric grease so it gets a good signal, and that's going to go on the bottom just like that, and it's going to detect the level of the water and report it back wirelessly to the Cerbo GX. Now there's one stipulation with these sensors. Mopeka says they do not work well with the black water tanks. You're welcome to try it, but with the debris in there, it could interrupt the signal. And so for your black water tanks, if you have that situation, you may want to use a resistive tank sender. This is from KUS, and this is going to send a resistance reading as the floater moves in the tank. They do make these for black water tanks. They've got a little cage around the floater. But basically, this is going to natively plug into the bottom of the Cerbo GX where it says tanks and report that data. So that's going to cover you for your black water tank if you have one. Now before we dive into the setup of these sensors, it's pretty easy. We're going to calibrate them with the Mopeka Tank Check app, and then we're going to pull them up on the Cerbo GX, which is pretty straightforward. Pretty much if we turn on Bluetooth sensors on this, it's going to automatically detect those sensors. We're going to be able to go in and give them a custom name, and then we do a little bit of final calibration based on our tank size here in the Cerbo GX, and I'm going to show you how to do that in just a sec. But if you're interested in your overall power system for your van or RV, I have a resource that you may be interested in called the Ultimate Van Power Cheat Sheet. It's got a discussion of the three major charging sources, which are solar, shore, and alternator power. And it talks about how they all have strengths, but they each also have weaknesses as well. But when you bring them together in a holistic power strategy, it's going to make sure that you have a good charge source no matter where you go out on the road, so you can enjoy your travels out there and you're not going to be worried about running out of power. There's also a discussion about different battery types, and that's going to help you narrow in on which battery type is going to be right for your project. And then lastly, there is a really cool diagram that essentially shows your entire system on one page. It's going to show your three major charging sources at the top, and it's going to show how that power is linked through the system and how it comes out at your end devices such as your phone charger or your microwave. For instance, what are the links between, say, your solar panel and that microwave? So it's a really illuminating diagram that I think you'll find useful. To get your own copy of the Ultimate Van Power Cheat Sheet, all you have to do is click that link below or go to rosslukeman.com/vanpower. So with that, let's dive in and set up our first sensor. All right, so let's take a look at the ProCheck propane sensor. Now what comes in the package is a few standoffs here in case you need to elevate the tank. These are going to clip onto that bottom rail and lift it about a 1/4 inch to allow space for the sensor. So if the sensor is getting crushed or the signal is bad, you can use those to elevate the tank. And you can also use your own contraption if you're going to be doing a tank exchange and not using the same tank all the time, and you don't want to have to remove these from a tank before you give it back. You can create some kind of element that lifts the tank a 1/4 inch as long as you have clearance for the sensor. It's also going to come with a little bit of dielectric grease. You can order extra tubes of this, which I did for this demonstration, and These tubes typically do about 2 of these applications. I'll show you that in just a second. Now we do have some instructions to get started quickly with this. I'm going to show you how to set this up in the app. We're going to deviate from the instructions a little bit because we're not using the sensor with the ProCheck app per se. We're going to get it set up with the app, but then we're going to connect it to the Cerbo GX. So we're going to deviate from this a little bit, but the instructions do come with it. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into the app. And you're going to open the ProCheck app. Let me get this stuff out of the way. And what we're going to do to initialize it is, it's not detecting any sensors at this time. We're going to hit this sync button for 5 to 10 seconds. And you'll see the app, there it is. It detects it immediately. Now, when I first got this out of the box, it was not on. So you do have to hold that for 5 to 10 seconds to get it to turn on. But this is already on because I turned it on during my testing. And you can see it pop up right away in the app. So we need to do a couple of things. And let me see if I can make sure you can see that. So you can see it says empty. What we need to do is do a calibration to start out. We're not going to do a whole lot in this app other than calibrate the sensor. So basically it says to put it on a flat surface and hit the button to zero out the calibration. So we're assuming this is perfectly flat, and you can see that resets the little, it's got a little level meter basically. Once we stick it on the tank, it's going to tell us how level the sensor is. So right now it thinks the sensor is perfectly flat because we zeroed it out. But we will put it on the bottom of the tank. You can see it go haywire there. We'll put it on the bottom of the tank and basically use this as a guide to perfectly position it. So that's it for now for the app. Moving on, what we need to do is do our dielectric grease. So we'll bring that back in here and just apply it to the black rubber circle. Hopefully I have enough left in this tube. We just need to make sure there's no air between that rubber and the bottom of the steel. I'm going to kind of spread that out. And that should be good. We should be able to get a very accurate reading. And I do want to say for the water sensor that it's going to be the exact same process. Just put that grease on there. It's going to come with its own little tube of dielectric grease. Exact same process. So at this point, let's take this back to our sample system. We're going to apply it to a propane tank. We do need to put a brand new full tank on there, and we're going to calibrate it from that. All right, so we got our sensor ready to go, and I have switched out our propane tank. This one is brand new. You can see the little blue cap. So this tank is full, so to speak. It's about 80% full. That allows for the expansion of the propane during hotter weather. But we are going to call this 100% full. So wherever that propane is sitting in there, we're going to be able to dial it in on the Cerbo GX, call that 100%, and then as it goes down, it will reduce down from 100%. So what we're going to do is go ahead and attach this to the middle of the tank. And the instructions say to kind of press it, so help those magnets pull it up against the steel and kind of depress or squish that dielectric grease in there. And I've stuck my phone to the display here with some double-sided tape. And what we want to do is go into the app, and I'm going to zoom in just a second. I know you can't really see this, but what we want to do is adjust that sensor. Because there's a flat part on the bottom of the tank, we want to get it just right and get it level based on the little level diagram that I showed you in the app just a second ago. So we're going to zoom in on the phone, and I'm going to move the sensor until it's perfectly positioned, or as close to perfect as we can get it. All right, last step before the Cerbo, we want to adjust the level of the sensor and make sure that it is level. So you're going to hit sensor position. It's going to bring back that leveling diagram that I showed you before. Now I've gotten it about as close as I can, but I wanted to move the sensor and for you to see it move on the screen there. So you want to get it to the middle of the tank and where the sensor is as level as possible. It's kind of tricky. All right, so that is pretty darn close. I'm gonna call that good. I did want to point out one other thing here. I did change the units to centimeters, which centimeters are the units along with degrees Celsius that the Mopeka sensor is going to send to the Cerbo. But if you do want to use the Mopeka app, you can play around in here. You can set an alarm for, I have it set at 20%. It's going to send you an alarm notification. You can change the update rate. You can select whether it's a butane propane mix or what percentage mix it is. We have 100% propane. And then here's where you can change between percent and centimeters. And I've selected our tank is from the United States and it's a 20-pound vertical. So you can go ahead and do these settings in here. It may not be of a large consequence when we get to the Cerbo, but if you do want to use this app on its own, those are some of the settings that you can select. But at this point, our sensor is just about level and it's time to move on to the Cerbo GX. All right, so final step, we need to bring the Mopeka sensor into the Cerbo GX. What you want to do is click on the main screen, click on Menu on the bottom right, scroll down the device list to Settings, click there. I do want to point out firmware, the second item there. Let's go ahead and take a look at that for a second. You need to have version 2.92 or later for this to work. We are good to go, so I'll go ahead and leave that alone, but that is where you would update the firmware. And now scroll all the way down to the bottom of the settings menu to where it says I/O. And there's going to be a section called Bluetooth sensors. Click on there. We need to click to enable it, and it's going to scan for any Bluetooth sensors that are in range. So you're going to see 2 Ruby tags and 2 Mopekas. And I have named the Ruby tags, so their names will populate here. This one is called cabin temp. You'll see it populate in just a second. And we're waiting for the second Mopeka to show up. All right. This one has changed to outside temp. This one will be cabin temp, but you can see our 2 Mopekas. There it goes. And we're going to turn both of these on. And then we'll go into the LPG sensor and I'll show you how to do the programming. All right, so we're back at the device list. I just hit menu and it takes us back to the device list, and you can see our 2 new sensors in there, freshwater tank 35 and LPG tank 34. You can see we have a percentage. That may be wrong because we haven't programmed these completely yet, but the degrees Celsius is coming in. And I will mention, you can see my Ruby tag cabin temp says 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So those have been programmed. The Cerbo GX has been programmed for Fahrenheit, but in the case of the Mopekas, the temperature is coming in as Celsius, and at this time I cannot change that. As this video ages, maybe that will change, but at this time it's going to be Celsius. This entire device has been set to Fahrenheit, but these are still in Celsius. You can see the outside temp, 81 Fahrenheit. So just something to note. It's not that important because it's basically taking the temperature of the fuel or of the water, so it's less important than the temperature of your space. But moving on, let's click on LPG tank and go into it. We've got some parameters here. I've demarcated it as 4 gallons for a 15-pound propane tank. Here in the US, it's about 4 gallons of propane. This is less important than just the percentage. So as you can tell, it's going to go from 4 gallons to 3 gallons to 2 gallons. It's a very crude way to measure. It's better to look at the percentage because that's going to go by 1% at a time, and it's going to be a much more precise measurement. But we want to go to the bottom where it says Setup and Device. So we'll go to Setup first. You can change the capacity. If you want to change the gallons, you can do that there. Click the check mark to secure your answer. You can see this sensor value when empty and sensor when full. So this is very pertinent here, 22.1 centimeters. So I already set this up a minute ago. But you can see the current sensor value is 22.1. So I'll remind you, we have a brand new full propane tank. The sensor is literally reading 22.1 at this moment. And so we're going to use that as our 100%. So you would go sensor value in full, and you would dial that in to exactly what it says at this moment. So that's why you're going to start with a full tank. It's so you can get that 22.1 centimeters or however many centimeters, and you're going to plug it into sensor value in full, and that's going to represent your 100% reading. Fluid type, we can change that from LPG. We've got a few options in here, such as diesel, gasoline, oil, things like that. Butane ratio, the calculation changes a little bit if there's a propane butane mix. We currently have 100% propane, so I'm going to leave butane ratio at 0. You can change your units. We're dealing with US gallons. So that's about all we can do in setup. Now we're going to click on device, and let's give it a name. So it's going to show up as LPG 34 at this time, but you can click on name here. And I'm just going to call it propane. All right, so we should be good to go. You can see it shows up as propane on the list now. You can see the freshwater tank 35 has the old name, but propane has been renamed. And now if we go to the tank's overview screen, we see a propane, and then you see the freshwater tank that has not been renamed. And if we click on the LPG icon, it'll just show us our propane tanks. Now that's at 100%. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an old tank that's almost out of propane on the mount here, and I'm going to connect the sensor, and I want you to watch the percentage drop with the empty tank, or the tank that's almost empty. All right, you saw it update in real time. I switched out the sensor and put it on the tank that's almost empty, and it has dropped down to 14%. And if we go in and look at the centimeters, let's see, propane, setup, 3.6 centimeters. So if you recall, it was 22.1 centimeters. So that's how far down the fluid level has dropped when I put the tank that has far less propane in it. So that is how you would set up the Mopeka sensors with the Cerbo GX. I do want to mention that if you have your Cerbo GX connected to the VRM portal, you will be able to pull in the Mopeka sensors. Here on the bottom right, you can see freshwater 35 and propane. So whatever you name it in the Cerbo GX, that name will appear here in the VRM portal. And then if we go back to the Advanced tab, we can actually graph the Mopeka sensor data. You can see I have it here on the bottom right, propane level. And I've set the graph to show the last hour, and you can see when it drops from 100% to 14%. So that's when I switched the tank out a minute ago. So you can graph the tank levels along with all of your other data in the VRM portal. Okay, so just a couple of final points. If you do want to set up a VRM account and you're not familiar with that, I did a whole video on that. And just look for VRM portal on my channel. I'll put a little image of that video up here. Now, there is one stipulation with the Bluetooth signal for the Cerbo GX. Sometimes people have reported that the signal is weak. Personally, I've never had trouble. All of my sensors show up very easily. However, we are kind of in a laboratory environment. I do know above 53 degrees Celsius, the Cerbo will shut down its Bluetooth antenna capability. So you may find the need to add one of these little Bluetooth adapters. And I have the TP-Link 4.0, and I'll flash the part number there on the screen, but it's going to go into the Cerbo GX USB port there on the top. And that is going to boost your signal strength if you need it. And just wanted to mention that 53 degrees is 127 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you are in North America, that is the cutoff point for that Bluetooth antenna in the Cerbo GX. So I hope my review of the Mopeka ProCheck sensors was helpful. Again, if you want help with your overall power system, not just your tank monitoring, you got to grab a copy of the Ultimate Van Power Cheat Sheet. Just click the link below or go to rosslukeman.com/vanpower. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.